Hey legends, what's up? Big news, a prototype of the Blood Death Knight talent tree for Dragonflight has dropped, and in today's video, we're going to look at it, we're going to talk about it, we're going to do that stuff. So, before we get into it, I want to give you a summary of the design philosophy behind these trees as posted by Blizzard. That way we know where they're coming from and what they're trying to achieve as we kind of attack this. Talent system design philosophy. Some of the biggest goals in the class and talent revamp are to increase player agency over your character's progression and build, provide meaningful rewards while leveling, and reinforce your character's connection to both their class and spec. Visually, trees are still an intuitive way to represent the different paths that one could follow while making many choices about their character. Dragonflight talent trees have significant difference from the previous talent trees that we've seen in World of Warcraft due to the fact that there is 2 of them. Now, the class trees contain a core set of abilities available to all specs in a class, and it has a higher proportion of utility choices, whereas the specialization tree is predominantly focused on bonuses that enhance your power in your main chosen spec. So another fundamental change is that much more of your class is represented in these trees instead of being awarded to you automatically whilst leveling up. Blizzard then released a short Q&A of a bunch of questions that they felt would come out from these prototype trees, and I've just taken a few of the ones that I thought were important takeaways. The first one, some abilities are critical to my rotation. Will that mean I always have to build a certain way? Blizzard's response, no. The most basic building blocks of your rotation will tend to be either learned from levels 1 to 10, awarded automatically in the class tree, or placed at the top of your spec tree as a first point spent in that tree. Major abilities that we expect to be part of most builds will be near the start of a tree or on easy accessible pathways. Number 2, does this mean it's possible to make very bad builds? In short, yes was their response. There are limits and guardrails here, such as those abilities that are automatically given, and furthermore, our goal in designing the trees is not to trap players into complicated choices in order to make functional builds. Now that's an important one, and we will revisit that. The last one I grabbed was, doesn't this all mean that I will use some of my points to rebuy some things that were baseline in Shadowlands? Blizzard's response around this is making a huge swathe of abilities open to player decision making requires this. We hear this feedback as a primary concern about having much less stuff than you had in Shadowlands, and they will continue to monitor this by feedback. Alright, so just a refresher around the talent trees if you forgot, your first class tree talent point is awarded at level 10. Your first specialization point in that tree comes at level 11, and then you alternate back and forth between the 2 trees. At level 70, you'll have 31 available class points and 30 available specialization points. Most talents have prerequisites on them. They'll be indicated by arrows on the final UI design. If a talent has any arrows leading to it, you must have fully purchased at least one of those previous talents to access it. For clarity, the arrows always point downwards or diagonally downwards as well. You can't go up. Every tree has certain rows that you can't advance past as well until you've spent a certain number of talent points in the tree. In the prototype Death Knight tree you can see here, you cannot buy talents in the 5th row and beyond until you've spent 8 points in the tree. And you cannot buy talents in the 8th row and beyond until you've spent 20 points in the tree. In octagonal choice nodes, you may obtain one of the 2 choices at a time. So, let's talk about Death Knight talents and abilities, the abilities that you will start with as your new baseline, so to speak. All maximum level Death Knights will have access to the following abilities that earn through leveling and do not require you to spend any points to obtain them. Death Grip, Death Coil, Rune Forging, Dark Command, Death Gate, On a Pale Horse, Path of Frost, Death and Decay, and Rune Strike. That's it. Let's get stuck into the trees. Let's start with the Death Knight tree, okay? Now I'm not going to read out all the abilities and go row by row. Instead, I'm going to talk about the key abilities that we're going to find in this tree, and then at the end we'll talk about a pathway. So, key abilities. Mind Freeze. Now interrupt. Improve Death and Decay. This is where Heartstrike cleaves in Death and Decay. Icebound Fortitude. Defensive. Runic Corruption. So each runic power you spend has a 1.6 chance to increase your rune regeneration rate by 100% for 3 seconds. Runic Empowerment. Each rune you spend has a 2% chance to instantly grant you a rune. Icy Talons. Runic power spending abilities increases your melee attack speed up to 18% for 6 seconds. Runic attenuation, auto attacks have a chance to generate 5 runic power. Permafrost, so auto attack damage grants you an absorb shield equal to 40% of the damage dealt. Empower rune weapon, so empower your rune weapon, gain 15% haste, generate 1 rune and 5 runic power instantly and every 5 seconds for 20 seconds. Horn of Winter, gain 2 runes and 25 runic power. Rune Mastery, consuming a rune has a chance to increase your strength by 6% for 6 seconds. Unholy Bond, increase the effectiveness of your rune forge effect by up to 30%. So for me, after quite lengthy discussions with Mandel from the Blood DK Discord, these are the standout abilities in the tree for me. So if we were to look at pathing now, top row, you'll be taking Chains of Ice to access Mind Freeze, so you've got an interrupt. Death Strike is granted by default due to being in the Blood spec, and then you'll take AMS below it. Beside that, Raised Ghoul feeds down into improved D&D, which causes Heart Strike to cleave, which you wouldn't go without. From here, choice will start to set in, and I think some people will become really overwhelmed by staring at the bottom traits in the tree and thinking, how do I get there? How do I recover my baseline? At the moment, in the tree's current iteration, Empowered Rune Weapon is the go-to option. It's going to offer a ton of runes, interweaves amazingly with some of the other talents on offer in both trees like Runic Corruption, Horn of Winter, Rune Mastery, and Blood Tap, which you can have all in this build. Remember, to progress down the tree, there are levels. 8 points to progress to the 5th row and beyond, and 20 points to progress to the 8th and beyond. I think a lot of people are going to look at things like improved Death Strike and be tempted to just make a run towards that and A-bomb limb. The issue is, how much are you sacrificing by doing this? It's one of the huge issues with the trees in their current form. There will be many niche cases, don't get me wrong, in the trees where certain things are required. And one, for example, is if you're in a raid encounter and AMZ was required for that. If that was the case, you could run a build similar to this on the screen right now, and this would still give you the mass side of Rune and Runic generation, plus AMZ, Will of the Necropolis, and Unholy Bond, and it would be quite a functioning build. It also depends though on how the trees function as to what you can do with builds. We don't know if you can spend below the 20-point line and then change points above the 8-point line later, or if a reset just wipes your talent points completely. So if you could do that, it means you could pick up runic attention after you'd completed your talent fill out. If you can't, then you wouldn't be able to, and you'd end up with like something like Blinding Sleet, or 2 points in Veteran of the Third War to be able to progress down into the 8th row. I legit feel like there's a lot of traps in this, and I know myself, I fell into a lot of these traps when I first started looking at this. And again, I had a lot of conversations with Mandel about this in regards to what abilities tie in with others across the tree. Where does the value come? You know, I wanted to go after this, but then what am I sacrificing to get there? You know, walking through this tree that you can see on the screen right now, we start at Chains of Ice and we run all the way down to Empower Rune Weapon. We take Blood Scent, Permafrost, Horn of Winter, and Rune Mastery as offshoots, and this at the moment is the most optimal tree that I'm showing you, well, thought to be the most optimal pathing at the moment. We gain Death Strike for free, we flow down 1 point then to Veteran of the Third War, we go over to Ghoul and we flow all the way down to Unholy Bond. We take Unholy Ground and Death's Echo as offshoots. So as you can see, it's heavily based this build around making the most out of Runic and Rune generation, auto attack speed that feeds into Permafrost, and the interaction with spending runes for strength gains via Rune Mastery. This build is very much a companion to the talents selected on the other side of the tree as well. The issue that comes with all this, because it sounds quite wonderful, is no Death's Advance, no AMZ, no Asphyxiate, no Sack Pack. Things you've known as baseline for so long and formed comforts around are now gone. Moving over to look at the Blood Tree. So key abilities in the Blood Tree. Blood Boil, would you ever do Mythic Plus without it? Blood Fortification. So Veteran of the Third War has been split into 2 points now, or 2 trees. In the Death Knight tree under its name, Veteran of the Third War, and for 2 points, and then for 3 points it's in this tree under Blood Fortification. The issue is you're spending 5 points to get back what you already had as baseline, and in Shadowlands right now it's 60% stam and 10% DR. In this, after spending 5 points, it's 50% stam, 10% DR. Vampiric Blood, obviously you wouldn't miss out on having this. Blood Tap for rune control. Relish in Blood is now changed and it's runic generation and healing. Tombstone, runic generation, a defensive, ties in really well with Crimson Rune Weapon, and it also goes well with Everlasting Bond. Dancing Rune Weapon, you wouldn't leave home without this. Everlasting Bond is a version of our tier set bonus carried through into Dragonflight, and Death's Caress has changed now. 6-second cooldown grants 2 Bone Shield charges as well as applying Blood Plague. So let's talk about a pathing through this tree, and again, this is a suggested build at the moment. So Heartstrike would kick it off up the top, you've got no other choice, and it cascades down. We're going to claw a lot of baseline back through this tree. So Marrow Rend and Improved Marrow Rend, which function the same in-game now. 3 Bone Shield charges from a Marrow Rend, and then the Improved Marrow Rend gives you the 10% haste from Bone Shield. We pick up Foul Bulwark again. Reinforced Bones provides us with 10% armor from Bone Shield. We get Blood Tap, Blood Boil, and Imp Blood Boil for 2 charges of Blood Boil. Crimson Scourge, Room Tap, Blood Fortification, which we covered before. Hastily Bargain, which is a throwback to the BFA Azurite trait with 6% haste from Crimson Scourge procs. Death's Caress, and we spoke about its changed interaction there. Relish in Blood, which is now different. So whilst Crimson Scourge is active, your next D&D heals you for a small amount per Bone Shield charge you have, and you gain 10 runic power. Vampiric Blood, Tombstone, we spoke about how that works. Improved Vampiric Blood, Dancing Rune Weapon, Rapid Decomposition, Shattering Bones, which is a new one. When a Bone Shield is consumed, it deals damage. Heart Rend, this reduces the cost of your Death Strike by 10 and can increase your Death Strike damage. Crimson Rune Weapon, and Everlasting Bond. So outside of this pathway, you'll be missing out on Ossuary, Hemostasis, Heartbreaker, Mass Grip, Red Thirst, Bone Storm, Purg, Voracious, Bloodworms, and Unquenchable Thirst, which appears to be this Benthia Lego throw-in with Vampiric Blood, which, you know, I respect them trying to do something cool there. So, thoughts on all of this? So I think I can already see a lot of annoyed or confused faces when we start talking about and going through these talent trees. I think it's a really interesting point to raise with Blizzard's design philosophy about their goal in designing these trees to not trap players in complicated choices to make a functional build. And I think it kind of does exactly that. I think a lot of people by default will just set out to try and claw back what they had as baseline in Shadowlands, feeling like that's the optimal pathing, which sadly it isn't, and you are not even going to make it back to baseline in this current state. It could all change, right? They're prototypes. It's come out early for feedback, so I'm not trying to rag on it, but that's the problem in its current form. Now, I know myself, as I said, I had a lot of issues when I started looking at this and going off down the right paths before I had some conversations and started sort of getting pointed in the right direction. I think there's a lot to process and map out in regards to how these trees are going to work in certain forms of content. And obviously it feels strange having our core abilities fed into talent selection and spending points to get things back that were baseline and then feeling grateful for it. You know, like selecting points to get Marrow Rend or Blood Boil or Vamp Blood, Icebound Fortitude, or even, you know, passives like Veteran of the Third War being split up. I am still hoping and was really hoping for more new abilities, you know, or evolutions of current abilities that you could pick up and then choose variants off. You know, we do see it in the tree. There are a few examples: Unquenchable Thirst, Shattering Bones, Death Caress, for example, but I really wanted the tree to be filled with those kind of options. You know, one that I was thinking about before I recorded this video was I would have loved to have seen forks off Bone Storm, for example. So you have Bone Storm and there's 3 forks off it, and you get to choose how Bone Storm interacts. So one could be gain an absorption shield for 75% of Bone Shield's damage once it's expired. Second fork could be Bone Storm's radius is increased by 10 yards and it explodes for damage at the end. And then the third one could be Bone Storm turns into like a vortex and it sucks enemies towards it and leeches life to the user. So I'm just spitballing there, but that's the kind of stuff I wanted to see on the tree. I wanted to see freedom based around those kind of choices rather than baseline abilities back to trying to play the class the same way it felt. I understand the need for Blizzard to have to strip things back after the end of an expansion. I also understand not wanting to feel pruned and the issues around player decision making and having to tie these abilities into the tree to kind of go through that. However, at the moment, there's just no return to baseline. There are some really cool things in the tree. Don't get me wrong. I love some of the interactions and abilities. I don't want to sound all doom and gloomy about it. The concept is really cool. I just think there's this creep of being filler abilities already. And the choices, when you look at it, are actually kind of limited once you start to determine the value of your points spent. In the end, my largest concern is that a system like this is going to place even more emphasis than there currently is on Wowhead and Icy Vein style guides for players to not waste their talent points. If you're not someone who references those guides and you don't visit class discords to ask questions or check out FAQs, you're going to have a very strong chance, I feel, of capping your performance well short of where it should be. And we know how well that goes in the fantabulous community of World of Warcraft. It also leaves the door open for mass misinformation and suboptimal builds to filter through content creator sources that aren't checked, that aren't tested, and then sold as gospel to people who just take it. And these are people that are trying to do 10 to 15 keys or get their AOTC. And I think that's a big worry. I think it's great that Blizzard have released these early on to get feedback loops going. I think possibly some talent change positions would go a long way in smoothing this out. A few more baseline ability returns may be a big thing as well, but I'm worried about some of these filler abilities. As I said, 3% avoidance, for example, is not going to be useful to so many players. And we've been complaining about dead talents on Rose for so long now. I don't want to see the talent trees filled with them as well. I'd like more flavors. I would like people the freedom to build specs without such huge performant caveats that come with them. I'm keen to hear your thoughts though, so let me know in the comments below. Do you like the trees? Do you want to see different things in them? Are you disappointed? Let me know. I want to have a discussion about this. So as always, thank you so much for checking out the video, legends. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. See you, fam.